I'm Nick McDaniel. He's Myron Fancher. How the heck are you, buddy?
I am doing terrific. I'm so glad to be back here. The two best looking men in audio podcasting are ready for another wonderful episode, and we've got some new twists for you today. Some very
Yeah,
new twists.
yeah, man. Look, this past week I was listening to 83 Weeks, and I jokingly put it out on social media and said sometimes the best ideas are borrowed slash stolen. And we wanted to mix it up a little bit this week and go over some what if scenarios. And specifically, it's kind of like encompassing the WWE Attitude Era. We may bring this back and actually do other like specific time frames. I think that may help a lot because we do have a lot. And here's the thing: we may not get through all of the scenarios that were thrown out at us. I mean, like really not. There were so many. So look, if you were a Patreon member at patreon.com/tapped-out-pod, you'd have the show notes. If we don't get through all of these, some of these are probably, still going to be in the notes, so you could actually check those out. That's for our paying members again at patreon.com/tapped-out-pod. You would have gotten the show early. You'd had the show notes, all the extra content. But look, you can be a free member at the, just on Patreon. You can, totally free account. Get the show at their regular time slots they drop. There is some other stuff. We got some cool articles and stuff going up now. I was going to ask you, Myron, have you checked out the articles? Got some new art now that are reviewing some of the NXT.
Yes.
Raw.
I'm getting a good bit of articles submitted in my email box, because I get a Patreon account too, and they are great content, folks. Good value for whatever wrestling dollar at what tier you want to join at, folks.
Well, look, man, I'm making all of those ads. They're for now. They're on the free level, so
They're on the free level.
Yeah, all of it's just the recap stuff for all of the major shows. I'm trying, we've got somebody sending those in. Look, I can't promise we're going to get every single one of them, but he's kind of promised he's going to try to do as many of them as possible. Been really quick. Been trying to have them in by the next day. We're putting those up, so that's kind of cool. Again, that's at the free level at patreon.com/tapped-out-pod. So can't really think, it's kind of makes it a one-stop shop for you just to pick up all your stuff where you can keep up with the national stuff. We're going to do some local stuff as well. Maybe do articles instead of just the recaps on some of the shows we go to maybe. So lots of cool stuff there, but that's why you want to be a member. But look, we get it. You're probably sitting there and watching YouTube going like, I don't understand. Like patreon.com/tapped-out-pod. That's where you're going to be to get all of this. Everything we do is there, not just on the YouTube channel. But hey, before we get started, a couple little side things I wanted to ask you about. Like some stuff came out. Look, we've been on this big road to WrestleMania. We're heading, John Cena's last tour, all that kind of stuff. And, I was just convinced like he's going to win the Elimination Chamber. He's going to get a title shot, and he wins it at WrestleMania, right? Becomes Bully Ray on Busted Open threw out a different scenario and wanted to get your take on what you thought. First and foremost, he kind of brought out a statement of like WWE deep down inside probably wants John Cena to win that, because what do they love to do, Myron?
Take credit for their own actions. They love to build a superstar from top to bottom and it be his guy. Now, Ric Flair, where did Ric Flair win all his championships at?
That's what I'm saying. They were so spread out between NWA, WCW. He won some WWF title, So it's like they accumulated over broad period, but a bulk of his stuff was not under the umbrella of the WWF/E.
They like it all to be their content. They like to have the license. Now, Ric Flair can say he won all those titles, but WWE might not have all the footage to it. Hell, there might not be footage to some of it. But with John Cena, everything, there are video packages that we haven't seen yet, Nick. There's John Cena, greatest of all time. I don't care what anyone says. This is my turnover chain for John Cena. Folks, they're going to have this prepared for you in a drama. We're going to get we got what, another week before Elimination Chamber?
Mm-hmm. It's the first.
Okay. Yep. So we got another Raw, two more SmackDowns to see John Cena just drug and John Cena have to be emotional and you to get that feel and to go into Elimination Chamber where 60 nights away from WrestleMania? Is that the factor we hear next time, Nick?
Something like
Is
yeah.
it that close? Okay, there's going to be so
No,
much
it'll
between now and
be
then.
April. It's in April, so probably six weeks. Yes, generally they always try to do about 6 weeks between.
I'm just going on what they said on Raw last night. So, but folks, this is going to be the high drama. Did you remember that promo he did after the Rumble? Okay, you know how many people viewed that promo?
A lot.
A bazillion. I don't have an exact number. It's closer to a bazillion than one.
Yeah, and I think, but him saying like, I think what the point was there too was WWE wants their guy to hold that record.
Yes.
It's like their version of the story, of what happened in the Monday Night Wars, all of those type of things. But here's the thing: it's part two. So yeah, I agree with they probably do want him to be the guy, so they can always say it was their guy that was the one that did it. But part two that he threw out there, and I thought this was interesting. He was like, the night to make it happen is the last night he's in wrestling. Wait till the end of the year. So he's chasing this thing all year long.
That's a package. That's a package, Nick. What is that late in the year? What he declared he started 2005 on this quest. What's the last pay-per-view of the year?
Well, here's the thing. I don't even know that you do it on a pay-per-view. What if it's the last Raw of the year?
But then he has to defend it.
No, he doesn't. He retires and walks out as champ. The last Raw will be December 29th. So even if there was a PLE, it would have been before that. Because it would have been the 27th or something. That would be early in the year. December 29th, Monday Night Raw. It's all or nothing. Is his last chance. There's not even, think about it. There's not another SmackDown. There's not another there's nothing. That's the last show. The only other opportunity is if they finagled it, and I'm not saying this is out of far-fetched. What if he wins an opportunity on Raw to face the champion on NXT on Tuesday the 30th? The problem is, guess what? They're probably taping that episode. They typically tape those because you're going into the new year. If that show's live, would you dare do that? Or would you say he gets a title shot? Think about what you could pull on Netflix. On the last Raw of the year, it's because John Cena says, I am adamantly telling you, December 31st, I'm done.
I've got to do it. Before there.
Yeah.
Give Netflix that big pot of gold. Give them that payoff. Give them that giant house.
Yeah. What if by then there's a heel champion at Gunther's position? But I think he wants Cody's, to be honest with you. But if there's a heel champion at that point, and we go into December, and every Monday, John Cena has to win or do something to get a shot, and the heel champion is causing it not to happen,
run-ins,
just anything
minions,
and everything.
Factions.
And John Cena, man, dude, and it's all or nothing. December 29th, Monday Night Raw on Netflix. John Cena has to win. If he's going to get 17, it's that night, or he retires not achieving that goal. Who's not turning in at that point? You're going to watch.
I think everybody that's ever been a wrestling fan, like in the last 20 years, would have to see it. Like guys we went to high school with who don't give a damn about wrestling right now would be like, hey, I hear Cena's getting the last match, and I've already got a Netflix subscription. Maybe I should watch it. Hey, Nick, when is this going to come on? Hey, Billy will be asking you, or Goo will be asking something. Boy, those guys had fun at wrestling the other night, didn't they?
Yeah.
That was a good move getting them to come out.
We hope so. Hopefully they keep coming. That's the big opportunity. But yeah, man, look, I think there's a whole year to ride this train and build a lot of momentum and see what happens with John Cena. I'm sticking with my way too soon prediction. It's December 29th, Monday Night Raw on Netflix. Other hot news of the week, man, and I know you had posted some stuff or whatever. I just didn't understand the whole, like, people taking shots at AEW for the ring size. I mean,
there are so many things they legit about this Australian debacle that they deserve shots taken at,
Right.
not the ring size.
Right.
Okay. That's not like a show that somebody, the guy that brought the ring truck had a flat tire, so they couldn't do it. And so somebody had to bring a ring in from Adelaide or whatever. I don't know Australian cities' names. And he pulled in the ring and he showed up with a 16-inch, 16-foot ring. And that's all they had. And no, they knew they were getting that ring. Folks, give them a break. If you're going to criticize them on the fact that they tried to do a stadium in a city where they didn't have that big influence, in one of not the biggest city in Australia.
No, it wasn't. And look, we did there's a whole, one of the reasons why you should be a Patreon member, there's a whole article on there about like what happened and what went wrong and, everything they deserved to be criticized
Okay,
for.
but how did Ospreay and how did Omega have that amazing match in a 16-foot ring if it's that big a deal? Guys that are used to flying in the bigger rings, that 16-foot ring made that big a deal.
Look, ring size matters. It changes your steps up at your movements and stuff like that. But that's not the issue. The issue are they're professionals and they went out there and they pulled it off. You know what I mean?
What are you sitting in your mother's chair at home if she'll let you that close to the TV with your tape measure measuring the ring? How do you know? Seriously, how do you know?
So you could. Here's my thing. Like, could you tell it was smaller? Yeah, because there was more space between the ring and where the rails and all that kind of stuff. Like, well, whatever. Like you said, who cares? In the grand scheme of the thing, how about this? The show did really well. The matches were really good. They AEW, if nothing else, I tell people all the time, delivers on its pay-per-views.
Yes.
And by the way, this wasn't a pay-per-view. This was a collision. So they really delivered for a collision. They nailed it.
Tony got booed when he came out because there were some people screwed on seat value. But when he announced that they're coming back to Australia, he got cheered. So what do we say? On the whole, a draw. This was a double disqualification.
Nah, it's a win if he got cheered on the way out.
It wasn't a win.
Yeah.
On the whole, they did okay. They went to Australia for the first time. This is the first time they've been out. Now, did they go to Mexico? I can't remember.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so they've been to England.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the first time they've been outside the continental United States besides England. So they're doing different things.
Baby, I'm pondering. I was thinking.
And I guarantee when WBE went to Saudi Arabia, they got all the assistance in the world from Saudi Arabia.
Well, and they had help. Yeah. They got financial help from Australia. I just think here's the thing. They learned, and the only thing I would disagree with, I think it's a win if he got cheered at the end when he announced they were coming back. Yes. That's a win.
They were cutting their teeth. They were potty training. It's learning.
Lessons learned. But I will tell you, look, there's somebody who's not cutting his teeth for the first time.
Oh,
Road Dogg is been announced as the new co-lead writer for Smackdown. How ironic. I wanted to ask you this to wrap your head around this. DX now has 3 people that are like really, really high up in the the pecking order of WWE right now. You have Triple H, who basically is running it all. Shawn is essentially completely over the NXT brand, and now SmackDown is being co-lead writer is with Road Dogg. And I saw AJ, by the way, tweeting out that somebody was taking shots at him, and he's kind of like why? Like, people forget, like, this dude was like, it's not his first, rodeo being there as the guy on SmackDown.
Okay, so now this is just what I understand. But from what I understand, when you wrote for Vince McMahon, you'd write a show and then he'd pick it to pieces.
Right.
Or you'd write stuff and he'd pick it to pieces. So it didn't really matter what you wrote. And at the time, Road Dogg was the head writer. Vince was getting elderly and doing those things he's been accused of. I think this guy, he's an Armstrong, for Christ's sake. His dad was the greatest of all time.
That's yours. I give it to you. I mean, yeah. But how about this? He's probably the most entertaining Armstrong of all of them.
Yes. Yeah, except when his dad used to do a little dance. That was
I would lay
awesome.
money on you that SmackDown will become a little more entertainment, which is not going to make a lot of people happy, but so be it.
Well, SmackDown, honestly, SmackDown Friday night was hard to get through. That 3 hour SmackDown Friday night, because you know what, I got to watch it on Sunday because of being out at shows and everything. So it was a drag trying to get through that 3 hour. I need a little bit more pepper on that show. Give it to me.
We're going to get it clearly, but I don't know why a lot of the pushback for Road Dogg. I'm happy for him. I think we'll see. Here's the thing. How about we just let him do his job and see what he has a vision for?
Get some Ron Fuller tips.
Not get Vince McMahon's version, the filter there. So
have some tournaments where somebody wins a Cadillac like they did back in Alabama in the day.
You never know. You never, ever know. Well, man, look, people have been waiting. Let's jump into this week's special. The what if, straight out of the Marvel Universe, the what if scenarios are going to come out. So let's start with a couple. And look, like I said, we're going to try to get through all these. I can't promise that we will.
Are you? Is it me or you that's Uwalu or Awalu, the Watcher?
I don't know. It's a good question.
What if? Yeah. Welcome to the wrestling universe, where
Exactly.
today we ask, what if?
And again, guys, we're kind of like Attitude Era-ish, like that little window we're trying to stay close.
Time.
I saw some out there like, what if Vince lost a steroid trial, all that kind of stuff. We'll cut. Maybe that's it for another one. We'll go backwards, do some of the older stuff. But let's start off with a simple one, man. This one got sent in. It's what if Stone? This is like we get this one. How many times have we had this conversation? It's without fail when you have a conversation about Steve Austin, it always comes back to 17 and turning heel. Why? Well, what if Stone Cold did not turn heel at WrestleMania 17? Like, how do things look different going forward from that? Because, we go from out of there, we eventually, he's with Vince. We eventually get the 2-man power trip with him and Triple H, blah, 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 all of those things. But the question is, if he's the top babyface, I mean, he's just running through some heel guys. He's the top merch mover, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, remember, this is Rock Austin. Rock leaves shortly after this to go off and do the Scorpion King. So you got your flag bearer still being Austin as the top babyface.
God, I love that movie. So Austin's got to stick out there. He's got to be the babyface leading the company. It's not a heel. And who's going to be the heels?
Well, so I just talked about, Triple H and him eventually formed the 2-man power trip. You just have to assume at that point that Triple H is going to remain the top heel guy there. So they're going to basically go on and probably have Triple H versus Austin at least through the summer at minimum. Because, what we ended up getting is that 2-man power trip of Austin and Triple H, and they ended up feuding down the road with like Taker and Kane and other stuff. I think we just get Austin and Triple H for the title. Just look it through the summer minimum, maybe longer for that matter.
A babyface Triple H in this time was so different. I was such a Triple H fan. Seeing Triple H and Austin together. Heel Triple H, baby. I don't even know what to tell you, Nick. This is confusing for me. I don't even want to think about if this would have happened, but I think it would have really weakened Triple H long term. I think he never would have been able to rise to where he was had he not got Austin in the 2-man power trip and put him in a position now where he pretty much runs the entire company.
I think there's probably some others we're going to hit that keys in on that a little bit specifically about Triple H's future. But I don't know. I would beg to differ. Is he better off not being the heel power, 2-man power trip with Austin, but being the equal across the ring from Austin as the babyface and Triple H being the heel? I think that might have done it could have elevated me even faster. if you think about it, because now he's going to be looked at, hopefully, theoretically, on the level of an Austin, because they're feuding, especially if that feud goes, like I said, minimum through the summer, you got to think. But if it goes even longer, that creates the appearance that Triple H is equal. So we may have jumped even further at that point.
So this is about the time the alliance comes in, right?
Comes in a little bit later, but yeah, absolutely. We're, Triple H, it's right after it. It's literally right after us. What would happen eventually is obviously Vince thinks he bought WCW. Shane had bought WCW. All in storyline, of course. Stephanie buys ECW. So then you got Stephanie, Shane. They're leading the alliance of ECW, WCW versus Vince and the WWF. Well, if Austin doesn't turn heel, like, how does this all play out eventually? He eventually, for some reason, he joins the alliance, which never made any sense to me. What if he just stays the leader? It just kind of completely confused me. I'm not really sure how it ends up there. I mean, that's probably the hardest one. Rock left, so I mean, there's a theory of like you're starting to do two parallel worlds. If the Rock doesn't leave, which we'll come to in a little bit, does he become the guy for the alliance? Austin stays as the guy for the WWF at the time. It's pretty mind blowing to think about that one a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's something I'd have to. Too much chemistry in that one. Too much chemistry.
The big one, I guess, is look, if he doesn't turn, because look, a lot of people talk about he petered a little bit there after this when he comes, but if he remains if he stays baby, he's clearly the top number one merch. That's who he had been, would have probably remained or whatever. Does he continue on that trajectory? And he's still the top merch mover. He's still, the one selling all the tickets and driving all the traffic. Because when he became the heel, it literally was received, like a fart in church. It was not good. Literally to the part, man, like Austin had said in the interviews post this happening, obviously, that he wishes he'd have caught an audible in the ring and just kicked Vince in the stomach and stunned him, and just like it just wasn't working. He felt it in the moment that it didn't work. Him on the top. Here's the thing. However, I want to ask you this, especially how internet wrestling fans were kind of starting. It was at that point it was kind of getting there. My question is, do the fans eventually say he's stale? We're tired of seeing the same old, same old.
Well, possibly, but I never would have heard it because I didn't even know. I just had to get my information from just the good old-fashioned television where I watched wrestling and the magazines that I read when I was supposed to be working at work, because we had you've worked places where they had a magazine rack out and you just slip out there and get some magazines and read them when you weren't busy. And I read those wrestling magazines just back and forth. I hate the dog ear magazines you're going to sell later, but a stale Austin.
I think that this, because of the way wrestling fans are, I could see some people saying that. On one hand, yeah, he stays who he is so he can still be the top guy, merch mover, and all that kind of stuff. But do people, because like, look, if nothing else, there's a lot to be said. When he turned heel, he got to do some comedy, and he got some, that stuff with Kurt Angle, some comedy stuff with Vince and all that kind of stuff. So at least it made him different. He did get a little bit of a change of pace, so he didn't grow stale. If he's that way, if he's still the beer drinking, cussing baby face, my question is there I would love to know what people think. tappedOutPod@gmail.com. Would people go, yeah, this is tired, this is stale, blah, 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 how they typically, anyway. So part two of that is I want to come back and somebody said, what about The Rock? Because Rock does eventually come back. I mean, after that.
That was some great matches, The Rock and Triple H. I wouldn't mind having a longer rivalry there.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, because if he's still because it was kind of a baby, we thought it was baby. If Rock comes back and Austin's is a baby face and they don't feud, who does? That's the question. Then who's Rock? Is it Triple H? Is it Angle eventually later? Like, who does he feud with? if he comes back and it's baby, right? That's the kind of the confusing part. But look, it's a lot of different, scenarios, whatever. We're gonna run long if we go through these super details per all the notes that I put in here. But it's real simple, man. Questions to ask yourself. tappedoutpod@gmail.com. If Austin stays the face, who's the top heel? Because you got to remember, Triple H was hurt in 2001. So who eventually is that guy? If Austin stays babyface, we don't get the 2-man power trip. We don't get him and Triple H running through everybody all on WWE TV. It's a weird scenario and a lot. And I think a lot of that, though, could be affected by the next scenario I wanted to run by you.
Oh, yes.
The what if Shawn Michaels did not leave in 98? We'll kind of set the table a little bit. Everybody remembers Shawn hurt his back in a casket match versus Undertaker. Leads into WrestleMania where he essentially passes the torch to Austin. Get the big WrestleMania moment for Austin. Look, he was completely beat up at this point. His back was all messed up. Let's hypothetically say none of that was the case. So the question always boils down to then, would Stone Cold Steve Austin still have been the guy? Do they pass the torch to him? Because if Shawn comes back, let's say he even needed just a little bit to recoup, and he was gone for like a month, and he's back. Does Stone Cold stay the guy because Shawn's still there, and he is the guy?
Or does Stone Cold get kicked through a window of a barbershop and wind up living in Columbus and, getting a bad reputation for his behavior?
He would have been proverbial probably window, because here's the problem. Everybody talks about no, Austin was too strong. He was too much momentum. There's a lot of that is true, but Shawn had already kind of politically positioned himself with Vince that he had a lot of, think about this, even a drinking, pill using attitude problem, Shawn Michaels still had Vince's ear.
Yeah, because he was the sexy boy. He had every woman WWE fan enthralled. Boys wanted to be like him. Women wanted to be with him. It was the thing, and you can't get past that easily. I think having Austin take him out was a big step. I don't know if it could have been done without it. And giving that Austin that victory and Shawn going away might be the best thing. Might have been the best thing. It might have been what made Austin, Nick.
I still think here's the thing. I still think eventually Austin could potentially, I still think he gets to where he is just because of who he was and what he drive. The problem is you're going to have the constant roadblock of the, political Shawn Michaels in your way if Shawn never leaves.
Yeah.
And I mean, it does stunt. I think Austin's strong enough to still get there, but what if because here's the thing with Austin's career, how it's shortened with injury. But by the way, let's say, does that deviate the butterfly effect to the sense of, does he not get injured because it delays his career, his ramp, his rise to fame so fast that maybe he doesn't end up getting hurt? That's another story.
And if Shawn Michaels stays in power, does Triple H, I'm not in power, but with Vince's ear, does Triple H wind up with Vince's ear? Does Triple H?
Look, Triple H had his ear because of Shawn, but the problem is, does Triple H become the game?
Yeah.
Because, look, with all due respect, at that moment, we all saw Triple H as Shawn's sidekick.
Yeah. And so he moved up, and would Shawn run more than NXT now?
There's lots of scenarios where do they even get to where they are now? Is there all? But so it's one of the question is, I think you ask yourself, by 99, Triple H is a main event guy. He's kind of slid into a main event guy. If Shawn's still there, is Triple H the Intercontinental Champion? He's the assistant manager to Shawn Michael being the the GM, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yeah.
So the only way I think he gets there is, do we get the inevitable Triple H has to turn on Shawn
Yes.
to feud to get to. And here's my argument: I could see Shawn at the time. I'm not speaking of Shawn today, or whatever. Everything we hear about Shawn then, I could see Shawn saying, "Hey Vince, let's turn Triple H and make him my opponent. Push that Austin guy aside. Yeah, he's good, but he's not. We can do magic in the ring and da da da. And do we get a Triple H shoot up to be the opponent? Does that stifle the Austin? That's kind of, I think, how some of those things sometimes kind of offset each other. But there's another cog to this wheel that we want to address: the Brock.
Oh, that's a big cog, Nick. That right there was the first the first movie star, the first real movie star WWE wrestler. That made them entertainment stars, not just wrestling stars, but entertainment stars.
So
And
ask
without,
yourself this. I want to ask you this question and see what you think. Shawn being the top guy, and he's still there. We're aware Shawn didn't like putting guys over back in the day. Is he going to take this young Rocky Maivia with the pineapple hairdo that everybody talks about? Is he going to put that kid over to help make him? Or here's the problem. Shawn Michaels could be the ultimate roadblock for a lot of the guys that would eventually work their way up and achieve great things. Do the guys that kind of help get there, are they friends of his? That's always been the argument,
Yeah, his valve for people getting through him would have been very small and selective. We may not have got the big Mick Foley. We may have not. The Undertaker may have never got to thrive the way he did. That streak may have ended sooner. I think, and this might be why Shawn's such a great NXT guy, because he understands both sides of the angles now, and he teaches these guys how to handle things. He doesn't teach them apparently how to handle things the way he handled things, though. I
Maybe he knows how to tell them to teach it better, how to handle things better. That's a good life lesson. Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who did everything the wrong way to begin with, and they could teach you not to do it their way.
Well, that's the way I always taught interns.
Yeah.
Is I said, look, this is what I messed up. Let me show you how not to mess it up. That'll help you more than me showing you how to do something without explaining why.
Yeah, so, I mean, and then look, last couple tips on this, little dibs on the little information there. Then we get into the 2000s. We start having conversations of, does Shawn Kurt happen in 2000 instead of 21, WrestleMania 21, when he comes back? What about if he's still there and he's on his run? How cool would it have been of a Brock Lesnar Shawn Michaels feud where Brock Lesnar gets to learn from being in the ring with a guy like Shawn so early in his career? Little things like that like, hey, it doesn't maybe alter, the whole, situation of the WWE, but little things in people's careers that they could pick up early would be kind of cool.
I wouldn't have wanted to see that. There was a chance at that time Brock might have hurt him, but ask yourself, Nick, what if?
So the next one would be, what if somebody asked you, this one's always it's a tough one to consider because it's so positive. That we all wish was true. What if Owen Hart had not passed away in '99? How does the WWE look with a Owen Hart, still there? And a lot of people, when we have those conversations, we start talking about things like Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho was, he really looked up to Owen. What about a feud between Chris Jericho and Owen Hart? Because you got to remember, we're also talking prime, Jericho coming over. So he's young. He's still in it, and not, I don't know if that's his prime, to be honest with you. I would argue it was later. But just really good technical wrestlers at the time. And I just can't imagine that those two would be really, really good in the ring together.
Would there be more Harts in the system besides Natalya? I mean, would Brett be where he is now? I mean, I know Brett's an angry guy, but would he be as angry at anybody besides Goldberg if Owen never had died? Would
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. Well, let's come back to that. Let's table that one for a second because I think Brett's a pretty deep conversation in general. The one question I always ask a lot of people, WWE later in that 2000, 2002 range they start to believe in, like, and I don't mean that, I don't mean it derogatory, the smaller wrestlers, the Eddie Guerreros, the Chris Benoits, they're putting titles on them. Do you think if Owen's there, like, he's one of the guys that they go like, hey, this is the guy we have faith in to be, our top guy for a while instead of those guys?
I would have loved to see some matches with him and Chris Benoit. And there's another one. Maybe Chris Benoit that whole thing might not have ended the way it did if he had more input, with people and had more people working with him like that out from outside. I don't know, man. I think we could have got some amazing matches, just amazing matches. But man, this one makes me sad. Just thinking about it makes me sad.
I mean, look, you could have got Triple H and Owen. When Triple H had his run in 2000, the Reign of Terror, as they like to call it, Owen could have been a good babyface. I mean, because at that point he would have been a heel for a while. Like, what about a babyface Owen chasing Triple H, to take that title off him in the Reign of Terror? I think it's pretty cool. Lots of things could play out. Well, let's move on. Let's dive into the Brett thing a little bit because I think that's kind of an interesting twist. It's to ask your question. Yeah, is when Owen passed, he gets it. The Goldberg thing, all of those things. It kind of made him. Obviously the Owen was the worst. It took him a long time, I think, to forgive WWE, and eventually, like we all know, eventually he came back. But if Owen's there, do you think they figure out a way to patch those things up sooner? Because the only thing you're getting over at that point is that the contract issue which caused him to leave to begin with. But there's nothing else other than that. I think that's an easier patch up than it is, dealing with the Owen Hart all on top of it at the same time. So,
well, that changed so much. The whole Owen Hart thing was just so disruptive to everything. So, man, like I said, this one is the one that really makes me sad. And then we talk about what happened if you'd have been in the invasion, Nick. What had happened with that? What happened if you'd have been with Kurt Angle? What happened if you had a feud with him? What would we have gotten out of some of this stuff?
I think that's the one that I probably would stick to the most is a Kurt Angle feud with Owen Hart. 01, 02, somewhere in that range. Let me ask you this. Does he become Brock Lesnar, like a Brock Lesnar rival too? It always comes back to Brock. It always seems like it's funny. Like a lot of things always come back to Brock for some reason. But I think it is sad. I think it is heartbreaking on a lot of levels. I just think the world in general looks different in WWE. I think we get Brett back more, sooner. I've always thought Owen probably had all the potential in the world to being a world champion. And that's what kind of sucks, I think, so look, that one is kind of a bummer, overall. So let's just kind of pump it on to the next one here. We'll just plow ahead as they like to.
Your buddy, old Eric Bischoff. Ask yourself, Nick, what if Eric Bischoff had bought the WCW and it was still around today?
This one could probably take the next hour if we drove through this one.
What if, do you think Eric, just quickly, would have changed to what the high flying style that AEW and New Japan has and all that, the strong style and all that thing, or would he have stuck with the WCW style of wrestling?
He would have stayed. I mean, he was very much a story guy, so he's not going to convert or whatever. I think the biggest, we got to play. We're already doing the what if, so we got one of the biggest ones you kind of have to play with here is part of the reasons the whole Fusion Media deal fell through was because Turner just didn't want any wrestling on their TV. So they didn't have TV time. The company's worthless, their words. It was worthless with no TV distribution. So let's assume he got a thing with Fox, with Spike, or hey, Turner, it all worked out, whatever, and they were going to keep it. We're still going to have the same problems that WCW had. They're going to have to figure out like Sting, Goldberg, DDP, Booker T, Flair, Steiner, whole bunch of those guys. They all had their guaranteed money. Are they going to get them? Are they going to buy them out? Is that going to play out? Are they going to not get any of those guys? That's a huge one. That is a massive one to figure out. So, but however, here's the one that throws you for a loop. What I thought about this, we're talking about specifically about stars. You got to remember, AJ Styles and Frankie Paris were under contract when WCW essentially was shut down. So what if because he would have carried that contract. That was he was at the time. The contract was affordable enough. They would have kept AJ Styles and Frankie Paris. But then do they turn around and do we get guys like Samoa Joe or CM Punk? Do they come to WCW instead of eventually going to the WWF at the time?
Was TNA around?
No.
At this time?
No, it closes. It comes after. That's the whole reason there is a TNA is because there is a window. There's an opening there to fill that void. So do we even get a TNA? Because guess what? Jeff Jarrett was under contract. They could have just kept his contract. They could have absorbed his contract if it was they deemed it was affordable, and they could have rolled him over. So he'd have still been in WCW.
What about ECW? Who says ECW would have gone to WWF if Eric had a WCW?
Well, they filed bankruptcy and they bought. I mean, that was so they got purchased outright. So that was kind of
they could have been purchased by Eric. Or purchased by WCW. There's so many.
Here's the only reason I push back on that one a little bit is Eric has come out and said he saw no value in ECW at all. And I'm just going based on his words, not ours.
It was tough. Some of those shows were tough. As a fan, I will go ahead and admit it. Some of those shows were tough.
But look, here the exciting part of it, let's say they kept the Turner deal. This is a massive one. Let's say they kept the Turner deal. They still had Monday TV, whatever. So then the Monday Night Wars continues. They don't stop.
So
it's like, do they keep going head to head? There's a lot of things that people aren't aware of. Like there was a Brock Lesnar conversation, and when he came to WWE, like, what if he goes to WCW instead? What about Kurt Angle? Did you know there was conversation with Kurt Angle with WCW? That Kurt Angle could have went there instead of at the time. What if the Hardys are not WWE? What if they're in, because they see the Luchadors and they see the Cruiserweight division and they think, hey, we like that style over there better because they had to earn it to get that place. Remember, the Dudleys and the Edge and Christian essentially are what built that style in the tag team division.
Yeah.
Whereas if over in WCW, they think we could just do that right out of the gate, do they go there instead? The biggest part of it is literally the what ifs of guys that signed with WCW if it's still around. Because think about it. Styles, Christopher Daniels, there's a cruiserweight for you. Not in a bad way. But all those guys like Bobby Roode and all those, there is no TNA. So all of the people that come through TNA is WCW the option and the alternative if you're not ended up in WWF.
Do you think Eric's vision was that good though? Do you think Eric's plan would have been the plan to last?
Yeah, of course I do. Right? I mean, I'm Homer, sure. But here's the other one, because Eric was very cutting edge technology. Like always thinking ahead, and from the business model, Fusion Media would have been involved.
This is what I do like about it.
What if they're the one that go, hey, we need to get into this new streaming thing?
I'll give him that. I think Eric was always trying to push new boundaries. I liked what he was doing with that kind of stuff. Streaming services, social media, I can see him getting involved in that. At the time, if you remember, WWE was pretty much stuck in their ways. You got a pay-per-view once a month that was $60. You had to buy it through your cable provider, which is... Well, it took for how long did we got our Peacock our WWE network?
So here's the other question to that: when WWE rolls out the WWE network, does Bischoff pull the trigger and go like, "Hey, we own WCW, we got all this library"? Because they would have had the library for WCW, NWA, and all that stuff, not WWE. So my question is, does
Oh.
WWE decide to pull the trigger on the network, or if they do,
It's a lot of
does
content.
WCW go, hey, we can do that too?
It's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content they wouldn't have had at the time.
But how would you think Eric could have handled modern wrestling?
Yeah. Look, he can adapt. I mean, it's not like he sits there. By the way, he'll sit there and tell you how much he loves Will Ospreay in the ring. He thinks he's a super talented guy. It's not that he doesn't, but he goes, but hey, why don't you throw me a little story in there? That's the big difference. You know, I think he's like wrestling. He's modernized in that sense. It's just that he wants a little bit of story with it. But speaking of Ospreay, here's the biggest one of all. If WCW's around, is there even remotely any reason why AEW would exist?
No.
Because we just had the conversation about TNA doesn't probably happen because Jarrett's still probably under contract.
Yeah. Tony Khan would have still be fantasy booking at EFED and probably wind up.
He's going to WWE shows. He's going to WCW shows. That's what he was doing.
At the time, he was listening to Jim Cornette on the radio with our podcast going back and forth. Well, actually, this was way before then. But you think he would have probably wound up as an owner in WCW?
No. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff, man. I mean, look, we're gonna pump that through. Let us. I'm curious what your thoughts are on how things play out. If Bischoff had bought WCW and moved to tappedoutpod@gmail.com, let us know your thought. I do want to get to this one because look, guys, I told you we're still 3.5 pages of notes here, so we're probably not going to get it. Myron, you got the notes in front of you. Is there one of those that jumps out to you that you think that you want to cover specifically?
Hold on.
I'm looking at them. There's one that I'd love to have, but I like the next one, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I actually do. That was the one I was going to go with because I think this is what I can get the topic of. So let me get on this real tight. So Nick, ask yourself, what if Triple H had ended the Undertaker streak at WrestleMania 28? So they did not give it to Brock Lesnar.
No, because it would have been before.
So
here, let's set the background up. Hell in a Cell. Shawn Michaels was the special guest referee. Taker was 20-0 or whatever. It's some And remember, this is the one where we got the end of an era. The three of them at the top of the ramp, with their arms around each other, standing at the top of the ramp. The end of WrestleMania. Shawn in the referee shirt. So the question now is, if Triple H wins, I mean, he'd have been obviously he would have ended his streak. First win against Taker at WrestleMania. Does he become? Because remember, Taker was doing that whole the last gunslinger, that kind of gimmick thing he was doing at the time. Does Triple H take that from him? Here's the $1 million one. Would Taker have just said, "That's it"? Does he walk away then? Because think about it, the end of an era was what that match was called. If he takes that loss, maybe that's the thing that just kind of says, maybe this is the right time.
A faster way for Triple H to rise to the top. But they decided it wasn't worth it at the time. This is 2003, 2004 that this happened. Honestly, I think this would have been better. I really do. The streak would have been over if it had to be over. It would have been over to a wrestling guy. I mean, I don't really consider Brock Lesnar a wrestling guy.
I could see that.
He's a wrestler, but he's not a wrestling guy. Let
me ask you this. If he loses, do you think Taker's legacy, is it less than it is if he loses to Triple H at that show instead of coming back for a couple more after that?
No. After that Hell in a Cell with Foley, I think his legacy is cemented by far more than anything else.
Because I want to ask you this. Tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Is the streak probably, because here's my thing. I know a lot of people, we talk about like nobody will ever, for the longest time we thought nobody will ever catch Flair's title reigns. Okay, that's fallen. That's probably falling this year. Here's a bold statement. I don't think anybody will ever match the Streak.
I don't think there's any need to match the Streak.
Think about all of the things that have to go right to even remotely catch the Streak. 21-1, right? That was where he was at the time. I know there's matches after that they've added on. He was 21-0, 21-1 is what he fell to. You would have to think about that. You'd have to not only wrestle at WrestleMania for 22 years to go 22-0.
Yeah, and people don't, yeah.
And then you have to not lose. Like, the company has to have enough faith in you for 22 years to go, we're not beating this guy.
But that vision would have to never change.
Correct.
Like there would never have to be anybody in charge of the WWE besides Triple H. For all this time, Vince was in charge of the WWE, and Vince would make a decision that would last Vince the entire time. Vince never was going to leave. These were the decisions he made long term for the rest of his life. I would assume Triple H wants to retire one day.
Sure. I would assume
someone else will come in. And maybe they have the same vision, but do they have the same exact vision on how to do it? That's a lot of 20 years minimum is a lot of time.
Because here's the thing. Let's be honest.
Dead.
Probably this is just my assumption, for the first 10 or so years, I don't even think this was the thing. Like, I think this one day, because, we always hear like Michael Hayes or somebody one day turned around and realized, like, hey, we've never beaten this guy. Like, it wasn't like they set out to never beat him.
No.
It literally just turned around one day and was like, oh, shit, we haven't beaten him before. Like, he's undefeated. Like, this is a legit thing. So you almost kind of have to halfway fall into it, because there's not a guy that's like think about it, his first WrestleMania that you're going to go, this is the guy, we're going to run him to 22-0. The guy could blow his knee out 15 years into it, and he've wasted 15 WrestleMania matches.
And contracts, too. It's not like it was where Taker was going to stick with the company every single year, and they had a loyal guy in Taker who would be there for that many WrestleManias.
And although guys can wrestle this long, there's not necessarily as much need if you can make the kind of money these guys can make now.
Yeah.
So that's the other part that you got to look at. But so obviously we don't get Brock taking the Streak. So how does that ding Brock's career that he's not the one in 21-1? Like, arguably, here's my. I've said this to somebody one day. The reason I didn't think Brock needed to be the guy was because I don't know what it did for Brock. Like, he got to brag that he was the one who beat, he was the one in 21-1, but I don't think I would, if he wasn't that one, I don't think I look at his career any differently. He was still who Brock Lesnar is.
Yeah, I could get it. What that? Yeah, you're probably right. That may have not have been necessary. But where we are, we're still back with Triple H. How does this affect Triple H? Help or hurt? What do you think?
Look, the immediate list. That's the question. The reason why here's another reason I always thought Taker should go undefeated. When it built to the point that the Streak was what it became, think about all the backlash that Brock got for beating him.
Oh, yeah.
And Brock, honestly, was the one guy that everybody thought was like, okay, he justifiably could beat him. Triple H might not have been, even at that time, the backlash that he could have received from beating the Streak, because people didn't think he was worth it at the time. That's the damaging side that it could be. So I think potentially, yeah, it's a good thing he didn't for his career potentially over, from there. It's a good question.
You think Triple H come back and work in one more match?
Could he? Should he? Or
I'd love that to be Cena's final match.
It's gonna be tough, man. I that's a whole other. Yeah, booking his last. I just don't Triple H. I don't know. I just think health wise, I think there's just too much there, and specifically with him being his position.
Yeah.
that he's in now? I don't really think so. So
It'd be nice though. But would this affected Punk? If Punk would have been in this, would Punk have got that feud later?
Yeah, well, that's the question. Like, yeah, if he loses here, like if he walks away, is the next year at WrestleMania 29 he wrestles Punk? Does that match happen if he's already lost? Whatever. Is there a match at 30 for Brock? Because that's the thing. Like he was getting up. Remember, he was literally doing these. At this point, he was starting to do the I'm going to train all year long for one match at WrestleMania. I'm going to train all year long for. He was starting to get in that cycle.
Yeah.
And if the streak's not a thing, what's the motivation for him to train to get that one match? And look, Punk being that guy. I mean, Punk being he had that long title reign later. So does that even get play into it? Does he get that if he doesn't have them? I don't know. But there's a lot of things on all the potential WrestleManias after that are affected, especially for the next couple, because I don't know that either one of those matches happen. If he loses, tappedoutpod@gmail.com, do you think he retires if he loses that match to Triple H? That's a good one.
Like retired or wrestling retired?
No, I just wonder, like, if he lost, is he done? Because let's be honest, he essentially did retire. I mean, he was wrestling, getting up for every year for the WrestleMania matches. That's about what he was doing at the last, those last 3 or 4. Like, he came back and wrestled Roman, etc. But whatever. They eventually sucked him into that Saudi Arabia debacle that they, the tag team match or whatever. But I don't know. But so lots and lots of stuff. Look, we still had 1, 2, like 3 maybe scenarios in the notes. So those guys will be. Where will they be, Myron?
On the Patreon.
Patreon.com/tapped-out-pod. That's correct. That's why you want to go there, because the show notes are there for all the paying members. Even at the $1 level, you get the show notes. You don't get the show early. That's at the $5 level. But you get the show early. You get the bonus content. Heck, we've even told you here, patreon.com/tapped-out-pod. On the free level, you're getting the reviews of all the shows that, we've got coming out now for Dynamite, Collision, NXT, Raw, SmackDown. Again, not promising every single one of those. It's, when our writer can get them submitted in, we'll put some up there for you. We're going to do as much stuff to make the content valuable for you as, if you're a Patreon member. But again, look, we get some of our people, they're just straight up YouTube members. Tappedoutpod.com. That will take you straight to our YouTube channel. We appreciate everybody that's, make sure you're liking the page, subscribing to the page. Click that little bell so every time we put up anything on YouTube, you'll get a notification and let you know.
Yes.
But man, this was fun. This was fun mixing it up a little bit.
Doing this. It was a lot of freestyle thinking. I had read the notes and came up with a few ideas right before the show that I did not have last night when I saw the notes for the first time. I like this submission thing where people send in questions. I always have locked in to deal with fans like that. Looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to see how this works out, and I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm really glad to be a part of it, and glad to be here in Georgia, and Georgia wrestling, and wrestling all over the world is great right now. And I think people really need to appreciate that.
Well, man, what he's talking about here, guys, is we are going to actually change the format up a little bit here. We are going to kind of do some evergreen content, as we like to call it, at the end, where we talk over a few things. That we'll still do the chatter at the beginning where we talk about the hot topics or whatever. So if there's any different types of formats of the show that you'd like to see, send those again to tappedoutpod@gmail.com, especially our Patreon members. Shoot us over a message over on Patreon. Some don't, not in the comments or anything, just kind of message me on there and things you're looking for, because obviously the paying members over Patreon get priority, and a lot of their ideas we'll try to run with those as well. Just shaking it up a little bit, man, and making make it a little more fun across the board for everybody. And we want to know everything we're doing that you like and you don't like. Look, it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings. tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Hey, if you don't like the articles for all the reviews for all the shows, let us know. If you do like it, let us know. We'll keep, things that you'd like us to do some new things you'd like us to do, let us know. All of those things, we're more than open to listening and trying to give you more of what you're looking for week in and week out at the Tapped Out Podcast Network.
Here's a question for our Patreon members. This is just, I want to take a little impromptu poll. Corey Graves, work or not work?
100% work at this point.
100% work. Yeah, because they sent Vic down, or tested Vic from NXT up to SmackDown to do it's a work. Okay, cool. That's all I got, Nick.
Well, man, what's the old saying, brother? If I've got nothing and you've got nothing, what time is it?
It's time to tap out.